You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Leanne Brooke-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. And the next way you can walk this path is by joining us for the new evolution of Waking the Wild Sovereign, which begins this November. This is our most intimate crucible. It's currently the only way to work with us one-to-one, and it is the way to free yourself from conditioning and wounding, discover and express your unique gifts, open your heart, and follow your soul path, becoming the sovereign man or woman you came here to be. It's already filling up with the kings and queens who have heeded the call. So if you feel it could be for you too, then go along to primalhappiness.co/WTWS, discover more, and arrange a call to explore it with one of us. There are limited spaces, so if you think it could be for you, don't hang about, arrange that call. And now on to this week's show. It's with Sophie Chiche. Sophie is a renowned life strategist, multi-talented entrepreneur, author, speaker, journalist, and psychologist. She is the founder of Be Current Today, which is an innovative methodology that turns traditional productivity on its head. Likewise, she's also the founder of the select favourite Urban Sweat Lodge, Shape House, and lifebyme.com, which is an online platform where all sorts of people share meaning, where different personalities such as Deepak Chopra, Arianna, Huffington, and Seth Godin have contributed to the website. Her work's been featured on Ellen, Good Morning America, The Today Show, and more. Born in Paris, Sophie now currently resides in Los Angeles. In this show, we spoke about Sophie's experience of being 320 pounds to losing much of that weight and what she's discovered in the process about feeling her feelings, physical expression, judgments of others, what's true for her, and why she believes she created that experience in the first place. We went so deep. If you're ready for that, let's dive in. Hello, Soph, and welcome to the show.
So nice to meet you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm already feeling like this is such a good idea because we've got so many things to talk about, and it's interesting how we plan to talk about something completely different, which we may well end up having another conversation another day to talk about. But then there was something you shared that I felt this kind of like part of me go, oh, I kind of want to talk about that. So here we are talking about that. And it was interesting when we were trying to decide, like, there's so many threads we could pull to explore this whole topic of internal experience, outward expression, our cultures, experience of us and our expression. It's like we could pull from any one of those places. But as we were chatting, you were saying to me that as you experienced yourself as wanting to lose weight and trying to understand, I guess, the cause of it and different ways that you were understanding that, really that took you on a journey of self. It was understanding yourself and what was then creating, I guess, the behaviors or this underlying energetic that it made sense from that place to carry that weight. And I would love to know, what did you discover? What did you discover was creating that? And I would describe it as a need. I mean, I see that all of the ways that we, I guess, show up in ways that we say we don't want to be. There's real deep wisdom and compassion in these ways that we get needs met. We keep ourselves safe. So I'd love to know, what did you discover about yourself that was creating that?
It's really a deep start. Thank you. Well, maybe for context, let's just start with saying that I grew myself to be 350 pounds, which in kilos, the number was a little smaller, but still pretty dramatic since I'm from France. And so I started gaining a lot of weight when I was very young. I was 10 years old. There was a call to my family when I was in school that I had gone to the infirmary and I was weighted and I had gained 50 pounds from the year before at this really young age. So it was definitely kind of an alert, like a red alert that started. My whole household became, no more sugar, no more this, and have to go to fat camps when I'm, in vacation type things. And so there was a lot of focus.
Can I just ask as well? I'm guessing particularly being French and in France, that would be even more of a thing than, for example,
no idea.
Yeah, my goodness.
Incredibly true. Like when I was large in France, it would be like, I was always the biggest one in the room without a question, and by a lot. And there was always, am I going to be able to sit on this chair? Like France is not equipped for larger people. There's no question about it. And I did often sit in restaurants and break the chair. And then for the rest of my life, still a little bit traumatized that I would break a chair if I sit down. Those are hard to let go of. And the true healing, forward 10, 15 years later, when I had done all this work, the true healing came from, wow, this was all about learning to love myself anyway, right? Which anyone has to do, weight or no weight. There is, I think we all as humans in a journey of, can I accept myself the way I am? Can I express myself the way that I want? Do I have to hide? And do I have to put on a mask when I'm with my family or when with my friends or any of those things? I think are questions that any human that's curious about their own functioning and their own protocol, they have to ask themselves. So as a really large person, I don't like using the word fat because I think it's been used to really be condescending to people, but I was definitely a fat, very large person. The world is not caring, is not kind. Like I would sit on a plane and the seatbelt was too small and they couldn't find the extension, but they couldn't let me fly without a seatbelt. So they had to wait for me to outboard the plane. And people were upset that we were wasting time for this fat girl and sit on that chair, type of moment, which are scars, they're knives, on my body, because I felt it. I felt the shame, when you have to walk from seat 12 to the front of the plane and everybody is like, not wanting to look at you because they are, hoping that you're not going to sit next to them or any of those things. So being fat in our society is very painful. And therefore, to answer your initial question, I think it had a lot to do with like, so I'm reflected that I'm not worthy, or I'm reflected that I don't deserve to be alive, to be, or whatever that would be. And yet I fought for that. I want to be happy regardless. And I want to find my soul as any other human is in quest to do. And so I think that weight turned out to be an ally because I would go see all these, I would seek, healing and understanding. And I would go to all these doctors, healers, life regression experts, birthing, breathers. I mean, you just name it. I actually used to write for a magazine in France, and they asked me to write an article that was called "I've Tried It All," and it was all about jumping out of planes and just doing all sorts of things too. Eventually, I think was really all of it was somewhat to find my soul, but it took the route of how do I brave this body complexity, this body limitation that I have. And turns out it was all about self-love. So.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's interesting because I think there would have been two ways you could have answered that question. Both would have been perfectly all right and perfectly interesting. I didn't know whether you were going to answer more from a kind of human experience lens, as in, I had this experience, wound, trauma, and then the weight was a response to that. But I feel like where you took it was a deeper level, almost like it was a soul choice to come into this lifetime and experience that. Was my experience of you sharing that. I'm guessing you're familiar with the work of Carolyn Elliott, because we're both mutual friends of Dave, who's also friends with Carolyn. And her work very much came to mind there. It's like your soul was like, oh, I really want that experience. And therefore I'll get the kind of experience of not love, so that I then, get to experience that. And then also then get to experience creating self-love.
That is such a beautiful, I don't know that I actually saw it that directly, but I do. I remember my very first experience of, oh, this is a friend. I remember being at a therapy session, a woman who was doing some sort of dream interpretation that I was doing in France. And she said, do you realize how honest you are? And I was taken aback. Like, what do you mean I'm honest? She's like, we all suffer. It's just you show it. Like, you walk around with this tower of pain, without hiding it. And I am so honored that you do that, because I have all my wounds, except I deal with them in the privacy of my own inner kitchen, and you have it out. And I respected this woman a lot. And I remember sitting there like, oh, like, I'm honest. It's like, I'm not, it's just bringing tears even right now, just remembering this moment of, wow, just, I'm not hiding, and I'm not gonna let society, teach me that there's something intrinsically wrong about me. I'm gonna solve it, because it was difficult. As we were sharing earlier, it's like walking around with so much extra weight was punishing, and it was unkind to my body. So I wanted to resolve it, but I didn't want to do it because society rejected me. I wanted to do it because it hurt my bones. I would go to bed at night and not having done anything particularly difficult, but I would have just walked around, and that's, it's heavy. It's heavy to carry so much weight. And so, but I remember vividly this moment of like, oh, wow, this is actually here to serve me. So if it is to serve me, if the universe really does have my back, I love this expression that it's not ever working against us, but rather for us, then what? Well, then, how do I love myself when this guy rejects me because he doesn't want to date a fat girl? And how do how do I use all those things? How do I know I didn't get that job because of my shape? Or how do I use all that to come home to like, okay, it's okay, I'm okay, just like learning to be kind to myself when the world wasn't. It was an incredible opportunity. And there was, in my personal journey, sources from parents and school and brother, whatever, that contributed to the painful. There's a story. I come home from school, I'm 12 or 14, I'm large, and I pick up the phone. In France you still had these you could pick up on one side, if you did it quietly, the person wouldn't hear it. You could hear the conversation. And I pick up the phone and I hear this friend of my mother, which I thought was a kind person, say to my mother, is there any way you can find a camp for her? Because it doesn't look so good around the pool to have someone so fat.
Oh my goodness.
And my mother responded, I will find a camp for her. Which, so when that happens, it's one of those, like, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. But I remember hanging up the phone and being like, okay, so love is not going to come from that side of the world. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I'm finding this so fascinating. I love you. I think there's such, it brought tears to my eyes as well, that moment when the woman said to you, the honesty of you kind of like wearing your wounds or wearing your work. And it's like, of course, we've all got our own version of that. And then most of us have it in a way that we can hide it. But, you know, we all have that. And I really can feel the truth of that. What I was pondering is something we were talking about before we started recording, where clearly our culture really isn't cool with someone being larger than the sort of prescribed model, which again, you had these, you know, really difficult experiences of that being reflected to you. But something you shared earlier was that actually you realized, I think you said after you'd lost the weight, that it actually wasn't in alignment for you either. There's kind of like, you could say, well, do you know what? Culture be damned, it doesn't get a say on how I show up. But you realize after you lost the weight, actually, this didn't feel like it was your truth or was in alignment for you either. So I'd love to hear you share a bit more about that.
Well, it's again a beautiful angle you're taking, because I do remember having these, you'll love me in spite of my body, right? Like I want to be loved for my heart. And so you overcome, you other person, you overcome your disgust or, whatever the word would be, or the shame, like I remember vividly my family being ashamed, and there's pictures of the family and there's me over here, really large. Mm. So, and it's unconscious. Like, I don't think my parents woke up one morning and said, oh, let's shame her and make her feel horrible. I just think there's something to, and I tell you why I know, because when I was done, or on the other side, I had lost, I don't know, I was maybe 150 pounds, which in our culture is somewhat, especially for someone as tall as me, acceptable. But I remember being at the Hollywood Bowl, and which is an outside theater in Los Angeles, and there was a concert, and I sat row 12, and row 10 passes by this large couple, like large like I was, maybe a little bit more, but not by much. And both of them are carrying these popcorn buckets. Like, I don't even know the description of this thing, like a giant thing, and Coca-Cola, like, twice the size of my head, and I remember sitting there and literally thought, oh, how disgusting. And I had this, like, so that to tell you how complex that all is, because I was barely out of that tribe myself.
Wow. Yes.
But I was already like, whoa, you people are disgusting over there, which of course was such a projection of my own inacceptance and hate and self, not yet fully accepted. But your question really triggers this, it's complex. It's really complex, because I wanted to be loved for who I was, but then I didn't love who I was myself. And so of course there was this pull and push and not wanting to be, and pretending I didn't care. And all my girlfriends that, were wearing these little size 2 pants, were just like, not as smart as me, blah. What? So it's very, I think it's still to this day, like I look at it with now a lot of tenderness, because it's all a show anyway. This whole thing is a show, right? Like, right, this conversation is a show. We all somehow playing, not ungenuinely, but we all part of this movie called life, and we play roles for one another, and we all reflecting one another for what's resolved and not resolved. And so the essence of what you asked for me landed in, wow, it's all about my own perception of me, my own, do I love myself? Do I accept myself? Do I feel good in this body? Do I feel like every time I walk in a store and I know nothing is going to fit me, is that a punishing life? Or should I go and open a store that has bigger sizes clothes? But if I do that, do I really respect the fact that my bones are not meant to support so much weight? And so there was this, it was just a mine of rich soil, to discover who I am and where we're going as humans. And I remember too, one of the sessions I did with one of the healers, which was very expensive. I remember, for some reason, more expensive than a lot of things I had done, but he was really highly recommended. And he did the session with me. And at the end, he was basically like, it's all about breathing. Just when you're hungry, just breathe. And it was an expensive session, but I'll tell you, to this day, it probably was the best wisdom around that, because they really listened something to when something occurs that would trigger me to want sugar or want more food or want to fill myself, in some way. And I do take a moment and I pause and I'm able to take a deep breath. It really was an extremely wise advice. At the time, it seemed a little bit like, F you, like really $600 to tell me that I should breathe? Like, that's ridiculous, right?
And I think the thing is with these, it's like, it's wise advice, and yet whilst you're still, for whatever reason, needing to create that experience is not going to change the fact you need to create that experience, if that makes sense.
Correct. It does. It does. I mean, if you look at it as a trajectory, as humans, let's just say, I mean, not everybody accepts this assumption, but for me, we have an arch, like a journey, a spiritual journey that one doesn't do anything his entire life. And then for some reason at the seconds before death, like the tunnel or the, what have I done with my life kind of awakening, right? And there's some people that they lose their little sister when they were 7, and somehow that, awakens their quest for where are we and what are we doing and what is this all about? And if that's true, if that assumption is true, that we are here to awaken ourselves and we are here to discover who we are, then every road is going to take us there. Weight, drugs, sex, rock and roll, it doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't really matter. Mine was dramatic enough that I really could, like, people can smoke and drink alcohol and you don't notice until maybe one day they crash a car and they realize the guy's been an alcoholic their whole lives, but otherwise it's socially accepted more, some people watch hours of porns all night, and that's like, what are you doing with where are you putting your attention, right? So I would say all of these things have in common that somehow we go far away from ourselves so that we realize, like, we hit something, right? We hit something, and that is the famous, it's usually this way, like we hit the bottom of a pool and one day we decide, it's time to come back to the surface. And whatever journey that is, I encourage people to embrace that and do it as soon, as fast, as graceful, as rich as possible, because there really is I don't know of another way to live a fulfilling life. Like, denial doesn't work. Ignoring our pain doesn't work, right? Like putting ourselves in work 20-hour days, doesn't work. None of that works eventually. So
you were saying something that was just aligning with something that I was seeing, that there was a real gift in the way you got brought to do the deep work. At, as you say, at probably an earlier age than most, and I guess a more focused way than most. And this is so much I want to say at once, and I'm trying to get it in some decent order. So on the one hand, you're completely right. We've all got our journey. We've all got that, whether we choose it or not, we've got work to do to liberate ourselves, to kind of live as who we came here to be. And we'll have, most of us, conditioning and wounds that will take us into more and more not self, as you're describing. And the interesting thing is, for most people, it's actually an experience, I'd say, where we're trying more and more to, and I suppose in one way you were, but it's like we tend to contort ourselves more and more to fit what our culture is telling us is acceptable. Yeah. And then we have to sort of detangle ourselves from that to find our way to what is actually true for us. It feels as though you had this interesting experience where you were started with something that was less acceptable to our culture, and then your work was there to then navigate yourself back to what was true for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, as much as we're doing this positive culture around being overweight, and there certainly has been this beautiful coming back from the culture where now, photography is not altered as much in magazines, and there's a beautiful boomeranging, towards the truth, if nothing else, the truth. Like even models, 97% of these bodies we're seeing are not these bodies at all. Like between the makeup, I actually saw on Instagram years ago that really struck me. It's like this really not pretty woman. She really is not very pretty. And it starts with the hair and the this and it's just like completely whatever. And then there's all these people and you can see it kind of fast, very fast doing, but there's the hair person and there's the makeup person and then there's the whatever. And then they Photoshop and this woman who's really completely uninteresting becomes this perceived as model looking very very striking person. And I remember thinking it's like, oh, it's all an illusion, but in reality it is an illusion. Even if in this moment you and I are not made up and photoshopped and it's still illusion. There's still the illusion of like, oh, here we are, two humans speaking of their experience, and this moment is genuine. But in the spam of the biggest of everything, it's like I cannot be completely transparent in this moment, nor are you. And somehow out of that, we have some wisdom that comes from it. But in my perception of the spirituality, this is all entirely an illusion. And all that really is true for me is that path to my heart, that path to your heart, that path to, how do we strip ourselves of all of this anyway, right? Wake, no wake, makeup, no makeup, right? It's all that journey for me was about tapping into what touches someone, what inspires someone, what makes me show up at my most connected place. And so the weight turns out was a detail. It could have been, like I smoked 3 packs a day. That could have been the route. I had sex with people I didn't know when I was very young, and that could have been the path. It's like every self-destructive behavior turns out was it's not that, hit the wall and be like, oh, that's not loving. That's not self-loving. That's not other loving. That's not kind. Okay, let me try over here. Let me try over here. And now in my 50s, I know it was all about that. And maybe if we talk in 5 years, I'll be like, that was all baloney. Because I'll be questioning something else. I don't know. But this quest feels good. This quest of how do I love this moment? How do I, when something happens, how do I see it as the universe having my back, as we were saying earlier, as opposed to, even COVID, and I know how controversial the topic is, but it's like, the universe has our back. So what is this? Even people that are suffering and that are being put in really dire situations, and somehow it's still the universe has our back. And so what is this person learning? And how some people end up pretty gracious in difficult situations and some people don't, and that's learning. And I feel like maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that the heart for me is, how do I use every situation to transcend and to choose the higher road and to wait and other things.
Wonderful. I was just loving the way that you'd talked about that illusionary nature of life, and then also earlier spoke about it kind of all being a show. And coming to this idea of expression and how that can be a choice, taking part in the show, taking part in choosing to create the illusion versus it being compelled by culture, compelled by our wounding. And I was thinking about how I shared with you before we started recording how much of our work is around archetypes and expression, and the expression of, this is a unique facet of oneness that we came here to be. And I've had some interesting experiences recently where I'm training in shamanism. So at some points I'm like stripped, literally naked, but also stripped of so much of my kind of ways of expressing like aspects of my identity, whether that be makeup, whether that be, I'm literally in the woods without anything at all. And so it's been a really interesting exploration of these aspects that I see as me. And then how, as I'm back in, back to my normal life, how I'm choosing add things back in again. And it feels very much more like it's a choice rather than this, like, oh, of course I get up and look like this and, you know, all of these things. And so coming back to this idea that on the one hand, you've experienced, and I know that you said it was kind of a strange thing for you to experience yourself as being at one way and being treated one way, and then a different way and being treated a different way, even though you were just as kind, just as smart both times, you were treated very differently culturally. And on the one hand, you could say, well, how is that loving? How is that, you know, kind and all those things? And there is a truth that the way that we express is going to affect other people's experience of us. And I was going back to this idea of this show that we're co-creating, and we're going to be co-creating it, whether we like it or not, whether we do it consciously or not, whether it's in alignment or not. And I'm trying to work my way round to like a question. There is one, but I haven't quite got there yet. And
I'm coming along. I'm with you.
I was thinking how there's this, again, there's an undeniable, whether we like it or not, there's an undeniable truth that how we look in particular, we obviously can express ourselves in all kinds of ways, but as this is, I guess, primarily about how we look in this particular conversation. There's like an almost like uncomfortable truth that if it happens that our expression is one that's deemed, if our aligned expression is one that's deemed acceptable by our culture, we're going to have a certain type of experience because of it. As in, you're experiencing people reacting to you more positively now.
Yes.
Because of how you look. And going back to what we were saying about this kind of, what is it I want to ask you? It's something around that, just like freedom, you know, liberation, where we're not being pulled by that. And so I'm interested to know your experience, whether that's created this sense of then being like tugged into your point of focus being more on how people are responding to you in terms of how you now look versus this inner self and how that's expressing in the world. That's kind of the nub of what I want to ask, but feel free to talk about anything I've just said, because I think there's a lot here. I
feel like we're both having an experience of like, you say something and it's like seeping into my, like both having a version of that. Two things came to mind, and I'm going to try to hold on to both of them. But one is I went to, I used to work with Arianna Huffington on all sorts of events, and I don't know if you know her, and she certainly lived in England for many years. But she was talking about an app that her new company has developed, which is about teaching people not to use their phone as much and to take some space and time from our phone. But to do that, you had to be on the phone. Right? And so I remember I was at a talk where she was talking about it, and I struck a conversation with her at some point and said, you know, like, well, how do you asking people to come to the phone to teach them to not be on the phone? Like, talk to me about that. And of course she had thought of it, because she had a very brilliant response, as she would, but she said something along the lines of like, you have to go where the people are. You have to start, even if the desire is to have, you know, kind of an elevation or some sort of an extraction from the addiction. In this case, you know, I think we have all become a version of addicted to our phones and our toys, you know, let's call it. But I love this idea that you have to go where the people are. And when I was, you know, the fact that I look like this allows me to speak of a journey that I could not have spoken of when I was 350 pounds. There's something to, so something along those lines, that there's something to having resolved a number of things that make it interesting to have a conversation. Like if I had started this conversation with you and said, I'm 350 pounds and I love myself and that's how it is, we would be having a different conversation, but we wouldn't having this one. And so somehow to use what happens for our advancement and our growth and our, do I find myself more, I know where I was going. There was a reason why eating served me when I was overeating is because it was covering my feelings. I was having feelings that I didn't know what to do with. And overeating, especially sugars and breads and pasta, all sorts of sleeping aids, call it, because now I can see, because I don't need any of those things. And if I have a little bit of it, I literally will like faint, because I'm so not used to having any in my body. But clearly it was, that was the work. It was learning to express my feelings. So that is what made me less interesting, not the weight. The weight was the result, but the fact that I was unable to feel my feelings and be true to what was happening. And you would ask me how I'm doing, and I'd be like, I'm fine, with this like tightness everywhere, that clearly I wasn't fine at all. But I was lying, and the food was covering the lies, and the food was creating the weight. That's what was not interesting for me, more than the weight itself, if that makes sense. Like the journey was becoming more and more genuine, and therefore feel my actual feelings. That is what turned me into a more interesting human. I'm pretty sure that if I was 300 pounds or 350 now, and I could speak about that, like I could speak of those feeling my feelings, I would have been an interesting person at this heavier weight. It's just I couldn't have done it because the learning to feel my feelings, therefore to eat less or differently, is what got me to that truth, is what was triggered when you were speaking of that. And then the other thing, the second point I was experiencing while you were talking, had to do with, I remember The Little Prince. Do you read The Little Prince in England? Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Yeah. Of course, it's French, isn't it? I hadn't thought of that.
Yes, it is. Well, turned out he wrote the first one in English, actually. The Little Prince was written, he was in New York, which was very shocking to me. But there is a whole piece of the wisdom there where he says, when he talks to adults, they want to know about numbers, they want to know about geography, and they don't want to know that the wheats are the color of his friend's hair, or, some sort of poetic thing over there. And I took that to understand that in this society, being a certain way helps, like thin in this case, or put together a certain way, or having put a little effort in putting a little lipstick before I came to see you because I looked a little pale this morning, or what have you. That is the protocol that we live in right now. If we had met at the Rubens, my being 350 pounds would have been an incredible gift, because culturally, larger women and white, that skin that was like translucent, like mine is a little bit, was a beautiful thing. Turns out now it's more thin and tan. It's just, I missed the century, where that was in fashion. But because of it, because of the not fitting, if I do it from a place of loving myself, then it's a blessing. It was a blessing that I went so far away from, the culturally appropriate kind of presentation, forced me to pushed me in some sort of, I need to understand what this is, why people like or don't like, and why people do accept and not accept. What do I accept? What do I not accept? And all of that were fabulous questions that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. A few different things just come to mind, and we're almost out of time, but these feel like so many little gems that are popping up. I was thinking about the role of, let's say, privilege in the being, for example, like you're saying, a slim, white, looking a certain way type of human is going to get in general, a certain kind of experience that is more positive than not having those things in place, let's say. And it's hard to recognize that when that's been your constant experience. And I was just equating, I had a period of my life for how long? In fact, I've a couple of different things have just come to mind. So I had a period of my life where I had chronic pain, and another period of my life where I was almost entirely deaf. And both are now mostly resolved. The chronic pain is completely resolved, and the deafness is mostly resolved. And I was thinking it's similar, it's different because these aren't looks things, but it's similar in that it's given me the experience of not, and then having something that is a challenge, and then having experience after the challenge. And I was thinking, being able to understand the kind of privilege it gives you when that isn't there. Again, it just feels as though there's something here, which again, I don't think any of it's accidental. I do feel it's all fully chosen into, like before we came here, and then can be used to bring more grace, more love, more understanding, more connection, in just the ways that you're doing with your experience. I was just really seeing, and it's hard to be able to experience ourselves as not something until we've experienced both ends of the polarity.
That's beautiful. One of the teachers I study talks about the distinction between, not like, if you speak of something you don't want or that you wish you had less of, is the kind of distinction that allows you to tap into what is it that you want instead. So it's not like when you're healthy and you're walking around breathing like everything's fine, it's not then that you think of improving that. You think of improving that when you're in bed and you have a fever and you can't breathe and you're sick, and that's when somehow you're desiring a feeling better. That is an engine. Right? There's something dormant about, like, it's funny because I grew up with these two particular girls that were beautiful, and frankly, I don't remember them being super smart or funny, but they were so beautiful that they would enter the room. They had nothing to do. They just showed up and everybody was like, what can we do for you? It's like beauty really is that kind of beauty anyway, was perceived, as and I would walk in with my extra pounds and my whatever, and I had to be funny and I had to be kind and I have to be better, more to get, some sort of attention or some sort of play into the world, and I've become really good friends with her 40 years later, literally 40 years.
Wow.
Yes. And turns out her life was complicated too for different reasons, and she spoke of, like, no matter what she did, she would walk in and that was enough. And therefore she didn't have, like, she felt like she was just loved for the plastics of her and not at all her depth that she had, but she barely had a chance to express it, so we were both sitting there like with such tenderness of, wow, so that also wasn't simple for you, even if, of course, there was that privilege, and that word has been used a lot lately, and I find it to be a difficult conversation to have, because to have it among us, I am privileged. There's no question. My name sounds a certain way. When I walk, when I would send a resume, I would get hired more than someone else who has a name that's a different kind of name. And there's nothing I can do about it. And yet all I can do is participate in the shift and the change of that. But having been, 350 pounds, I have touched from, very deliberate fingers. I've touched, the life where you don't belong and you're not accepted and you're not enough. And I look at it as a blessing now. I really turn around and look at it as, wow, it is that less of that invited me to this conversation and brought me to the table of, who am I? Who are you? Where are we going? What's happening? This whole very, very deep, did you want to see these notes?
Oh, sorry. I didn't know that.
Okay. No. Let's pick up where we left off. I maybe we've said it a few times, but in summary, for me, there is a way that we can look at anything that's happened to us as the soil of, like, am I going to use this? Am I going to trampoline myself out of this situation to use it, to grow, to improve, to learn? And if I do, then whatever it is, right? Like the chronic pain, the not hearing, not having money, the having money, I can think of a thing really that I would look at that doesn't have this quality, that if we accept it and we accept the challenge of learning from it and loving ourselves from it, then it's all interesting. It's all,
yeah, it really is. We do need to finish, but one final thing that just came to me is how there is this just like paradoxical thing about our physical expression, where on the one hand, our culture makes it mean absolutely everything. Like it's the most important thing. And again, it's really important to look these certain ways and so much focus. And then on the other hand, those of us who have set foot on a spiritual path, it can become like it's irrelevant. It's, it's about not making that important and being, letting go of attachment to that. And I was like, and it is both, again, I think in recognizing if we're going to think there's any point to take part in this show that we're co-creating, it's part of it. And going right back to like what I really heard when you first shared this with me, I was like, yeah, there is a way of expressing that feels as though it is a celebration of our soul. And that could look like all sorts of things. And like that to me is where the juice is. It's not saying it doesn't matter and it's irrelevant. It's not to say, oh, it needs to look a certain way because then I'll be culturally approved of. It's like, what is that unique expression of your soul? And what does that look like?
Wow. That is really profound. I keep hearing the word gratitude in there for some reason. Like the key learning probably for me has become I'm grateful for it either way. So if I decide I don't want to put on the show and I don't want to participate at all, I give myself the right to do so. Like that's to me the I'm grateful that I've visited. I mean, can I be someone I'm not and experience what they're experiencing? I can't. I cannot be someone else. I cannot be a different color. I cannot be a different background. I cannot not be educated. It's like there are things I cannot, but I can tap into my heart and understand the compassion of it and the just imagining myself being in someone else's skin as much as I can, hoping that the other person does that as well. It's like there was a very powerful French song that was about this Jewish guy singing about being born in what if he had been born in Leidenstadt in 1912, and so he was a young man, in the Nazi Germany, and then there was this Irish guy who was singing about what if he was born on the other side, and and then this Black woman, what if she was born white in Jayberg, and therefore would she have participated in breaking down of apartheid, or would she have accepted the privilege or not fought for the ones who don't have it? It's like, it's very difficult to imagine what you would have been if you didn't have the circumstances you in. But what we can all do is raise this self-love and raise this self-acceptance. And the more loving I am with myself, the more I can be loving of others. I mean, that is really the kicker, is that I realize that the more I judge myself, the more I'm unable, like if I'm sitting here going like, what is with this dress? What is with these guitars? What is with that? It's like, which all of it is beautiful, by the way. But, if I'm sitting here in judgment of that, it will be the reason I feel separation and I feel difference. And I feel like you and we're more the same than we are different. If you slice me and you, we have the same organs, the same color in there, right? It's all the same. And somehow to come back to this place of accepting and loving, which we were, by the way, when we were little. Like, I don't think a little pumpkin baby, sits there going like, I don't want to play with this other kid, because they don't have the latest brand of, stroller. they don't do that. So somehow it's like, how did we learn this behavior that separates us, and whether it's because I'm fatter, richer, whiter, whatever, literally whatever. That's the quest, is to love this so I can love that, and somehow uplift.
Yes, for sure. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Sophie. This has been such an interesting conversation. We've gone to all sorts of places I wasn't expecting. How wonderful. Although I know we've not really spoken about anything that's directly related to what you do in terms of would you still share where people can find out about you and what you do, please?
Sure. So the newest company is called Be Current, and it has to do with productivity, but not from the place of the usual do more, make more, do more, but really from a place of how is productivity used as a gateway really to your purpose. Like when you look at what you're doing, is it matching what you want to do? And when you reach your 90s and you and I sit on a bench somewhere and we old and we look back and we say, was that it? Did you like it? Did you do what you wanted? And I'd like us to say yes. And so my life is devoted to all of us sitting on benches when we're 90 some, maybe 100 some, where we're going, and just be able to look back and be like, yeah, that choice I liked. I like that choice. I like that direction. I like that I quit this job. I like that I created this relationship. I like that I quit that relationship, because some of it serves us and some of it doesn't. And I'm creating these tools and these methodologies to teach people to be closer as possible, closer to our own bones, so we live lives that are very meaningful. I guess that's my new devotion, is about creating meaningful lives.
Oh, wonderful. And where would people be able to find out about that? Do you have a website?
The website is becurrenttoday.com. Be current today, the verb be currenttoday.com. And it has lots of resources and lots of blogs and lots of things that are speaking to this idea of like how there's no such thing as time management. There's something called me management. Like I need to manage this thing, but time, you have time, the same amount I have time, and somehow what we fill it with is really where the juice or the not juice, happens. So make sure we choose that carefully. That's my shtick. That's what I'm most interested in now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, you're speaking my language. I mean, you've been speaking my language all day long, so of course.
And yours mine. It was super fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh, I loved that conversation. Here are my takeaways. Sophie's experience of being large and then smaller is a powerful example of how our physical expression is received by others, regardless of our other qualities. I love Sophie's insight on why she created the experience of herself and life. This is such an illuminating question we can ask ourselves. Lastly, harnessing the conscious creation of our expression in alignment with our soul's will means that we may or may not align with cultural expectations in various ways. Our work is to express ourselves anyway. If you'd like to get the notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, do hop on over to the show notes, and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 337. And if you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or your app of choice and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get each episode straight to your device, auto magically, as soon as it comes out. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.